the great challenge about the market coordination failure in your project. And you mentioned the electric vehicles, the storage systems. And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that the same what's happening with PV? So, for example, consumers don't know the need metering, whether it's going to continue, and whether any kind of bilateral contracts. Therefore, that's yes, absolutely. That's a great example where there is a risk of failure because of the problem in the coordination of the market. Now, I'd just like to ask you the question, then you can answer. Can you therefore see that the kind of goals of the kind of roadmap for the energy transitions are at risk? Yeah, this is what I was about to say. First of all, I'd just like to talk about the first impression that's already been given by the other speakers, that in the last 7 years, the 7 years that we have ahead of us between now and 2030 are completely unknown. This is not true. As part of the national plan, there have been some very detailed analysis and simulations where we've seen year by year the technology mix and energy mix, but also the general operation, not only of the electrical system, but of the energy system overall. So we do know what's happening, so we shouldn't give the impression that we don't know where we're going or we don't know what we're doing. What I underlined earlier is that despite the fact that there is a huge waiting list for renewables investors, that doesn't mean that we know that these investments are going to take place and we're going to reach the 80% target. This is where the issue is. All these need to be coordinated, and at the same time, but let's not forget, but there's no clear decision on the basic instrument, and that's the PPAs, which is the great opportunity to use the new European directive that was adopted a few days ago. Mr. Tsafos. Yeah, Mr. Tsafos raises some questions that, yes, this is all good, but the 80% is a difficult target. And he also puts on the table the issue of the energy market reform that was decided by the European Council a few days ago, with new instruments and with new guarantees that we don't know when we're going to see it in Greece. Just a general kind of view on what we've just heard. Let's just make clear that CFDs and PPAs, we've had them for many years, at least in other markets. I believe that, especially when let's not confuse CFD with PPA, because we're talking about different things. But on PPAs, I'll just tell you what I think. As most of you know, I come from the natural gas market, where we moved on from long-term contracts to short-term contracts. We saw that being very volatile. We went back to long-term contracts. Therefore, we see consumers who are disappointed for 3 months, then they're happy because prices go down, and this creates almost like a counter incentive for these kind of contracts. There was a very good analysis of the World Energy Institute that showed how renewables are used, and it just had the use of PPAs as one of the main instrument for supporting the development of renewables. And this was PPAs between, it was CFDs, it was with government subsidies. CFD is also, it was a state that was a counterpart. I'm saying that because what we're talking about is that we need to move from the kind of stock price, which is in Greece is which should move from the stock price, and we go to PPAs. This is part of the discussion. Yes. But when we're talking about PPAs, we need to make clear whether we're talking about PPAs where you have the producer with the supplier or with the end consumer, because we're talking about two different things. If we're talking about PPAs between the producer and the supplier, then you just move part of the market outside the stock market, and it's a different thing. If we're talking about PPAs for energy-intensive industry, then it's a very different thing. What I'm describing here, and I believe that PPAs are going to be a crucial element in how we protect the system and how we give access to lower pricing. But we need to keep in mind that this is just one measure, one of many measures, which carries its own risk, because when we're talking about PPAs, we all say that, yes, we do need PPAs, and at the same time, we kind of have another 8 things that we need to have in order to have a PPA. But therefore there is a risk. And just as the minister said, we need to find the right kind of mix between what the role of the state is and who takes the risk. I believe that there is a potential for more PPAs, which of course we're going to support, but we need to look at PPAs in a kind of wider framework of investments and how these are, and what's the appetite in the market and how they can fix prices and in what way. This is something that is not very clear in my mind. Not potentially that kind of wants PPAs, but somebody who's actually ready to sign a PPA with all the risks that are involved. We left the interconnections because we've been talking about storage systems and the increase of storage space. What's happening with networks? What's happening with the discussion on the Green Aegean, and give us an update on what exactly is happening, if you have any news on this.
Well, let's look at the current picture. Over the last 2 years, we become less of an importing country as an exporting. This showcases that the country's strategy, facilitated by the independent power transmission operator, a strategy that strives to make the country independent in terms of energy, well, it shows that the energy mix is becoming greener. We need pathways to export. We are building, in this sense, the second interconnection with Italy that should be greater in capacity as agreed with Italy, and then we grow other interconnections. Is that enough? No. Yesterday I had a discussion with the Belgian Minister of Energy. The main grids are located in Europe, and they have a greater demand. The Prime Minister, a year ahead, discussed that at the summit. We need a direct connection at high voltage between Greece and Germany. In principle, this would go through the Adriatic Sea. We know what it means to build overhead contact lines. We want to refrain from doing that, going through mainland, and then we run through Sweden and reach Germany. This is not the easiest thing to do. It won't happen overnight. But in order to become export-oriented, you need to put that on the table, the discussion. And the Belgian minister argued that in principle is in favor of this project and will support that if brought before the Minister of the Council of Ministers. At the Prime Minister and the Minister level, they are negotiating. They're in consultations with their counterparts, and we are in consultations with the power transmission operators. And we will find a way, a common way, for all of us to have a mutual benefit out of the project. The Germans are positive. TenneT, that is in charge of southern Germany, where the grid will end because of the grid's robustness in that region. It is a project that will be expensive, of course, but I need to say this. You know, these projects are regulated. This actually means that the margin, that the net margin of those building them is very slight. We were struggling with RAE last year, with the regulatory authority, whether the margin would be 7 or 6%. The consumer is not footing the bill for the networks. These grids, these networks are indispensable if we want to manage the energy transition. The last ADMIE study has shown that we need to double our networks up to 2040. So you say that the consumers is not paying for the margin of the energy producer, who is able to generate a double-digit margin. No, he's just paying for the marginal limit. We do not have the access to the media as the large producers. You know, this is why I need to say that here. It's not ADMIE, it's not the power transmission operator that increases the bill for the consumers. I hear that. Do you believe that it's premature discussing about whether producers and investors will come into play in terms of this project? No, you know, there is a realistic base, so to speak. We have an energy bottleneck in Germany in wake of the crisis. Part of that will be covered by the ambitious Northern Sea offshore wind project. But one should not ignore the best solar capacity in the Mediterranean, that of Greece, as well as the solar capacity. If you look at renewables, you first of all have to look at Europe, who is geopolitically stable. Mr. Kapros, I guess, misunderstood that. I'm not the one that said that we don't know where to go. I just said that we are in uncharted waters. We are well aware of our orientation, but it's very important that we not hit a rock, so to speak. And an example was the interruption of cheap natural gas supply. We lost 40%, and we need to be aware of such surprises along the way. Regardless of how good our models are, we need to provide a long-term planning and a pluralism, a wealth of choices, in order to stay resilient and, if needed, make the necessary adaptation and changes. I wouldn't want to be understood as the one arguing that we don't know where we're heading at. And the last question, and with a short response, I guess we cannot address all that within an hour. Last question, CCS-wise, you are engaged. We have the Titan and Motor Oil projects that have locked in their financing from the Innovation EU. There are other companies that are faced with similar challenges and need to come up with a solution. And Mr. Kapros, Mr. Tsafos, I think you published a paper on that last summer. Well, as said, they need to come up with solutions. We are really engaged. We are we have issued the first license in order to turn the Prinos depleted field into a bedrock where we can exploit for CO2 storage. This is something that we will be looking into over the next years. You said that companies might leave Greece. Do you think that they can operate somewhere else? Where, the CO2 emission cost might become unbearable. I don't want to draw the devil on the wall, but there is a large investment risk that needs to be addressed. We have to support this very significant Greek business field. I would like to thank you for being here. I would like to thank all of you joining us online. We could be discussing that for hours. I guess more questions have arisen than those addressed. This is natural. Thank you very much indeed, and have a nice day.